You might remember that in September of 2023 I went to Switzerland and sampled 11 different cars at the Automobile Expo. It's okay if you don't, nobody saw that video, but anyway, the very first car I drove at the show was the Renault Megane E-Tech Electric, and I was pretty impressed. Just over 6 months later, I finally got to test out the Megane E-Tech back home. Does it honor the Megane name despite the battery power? And is it any good? Let's find out. Welcome to the Renault Megane E-Tech 100% Electric. Yes, that is the full name of the model, which I will not be using to refer to it throughout this video. The tester here is wearing the iconic trim level, which in Renault land means fully loaded. It also has the larger battery and more powerful motor, but more on that in a couple minutes. First thing we need to talk about is the way the Megane E-Tech looks. I know that you're probably inclined to think that this is a crossover, but it really isn't. At just 4.2 meters in length, the Megane fits comfortably in the European C segment, or compact in North America. Actually, it undercuts a lot of other C segment hatchbacks by a few millimeters. Still, with the wheelbase coming in at almost 2.7 meters, in theory, interior space shouldn't be compromised. Overall, I'm a huge fan of the way the Megane looks. I love the sloped roofline that makes it surprisingly low and contributes to its squat stance. I love the light signatures, I love the wheels, and I love how it's futuristic and yet familiar. I also really love that it's not an SUV. In a world dominated by electric crossovers, it's refreshing to be looking at an electric car that's a conventional hatchback. I'm not particularly sold on the gold details around the exterior, but luckily they're optional. On to power. The tester here features the top-of-the-line powertrain setup. A 60 kilowatt-hour battery pack juices a 160 kilowatt or 220 horsepower electric motor mounted at the front axle. 0 to 100 kph takes 7.4 seconds, and the top speed is 160 kph or 100 miles an hour. According to the WLTP cycle, the Megane can go up to 470 kilometers on a single charge. When I picked up the Megane, the Rage computer claimed a 315 kilometer range on a full battery. Not really all that close to the WLTP claimed range, but I'm sure that it would be possible to get at least somewhat close. Smaller wheels would help considerably. The tester being on 20-inch wheels doesn't really do a whole lot of wonders to the projected range. Also available is a 40 kilowatt-hour pack and a 130 horsepower motor, a solid choice for buyers who don't plan to go much past the city limits with their Megane. Let's have a look at the cargo area. The Megane's 440 liters of space best a lot of C-segment hatchbacks. It also provides a lot of useful features like hooks and underfloor storage. Fold down the rear seats and you get 1,332 liters to play with. Great! Space in the back? Well, you know my stats. The front seat was in my driving position, and while legroom was plentiful, headroom was a little tight. Depending on the position of the driver, you might need to slouch just a little bit. The back seat is also notably devoid of features. However, the floor is 100% flat, so there's enough foot space in the event of having to carry a third person in the rear seats. I don't think they'll be particularly comfortable, but you can do that if you need to. And finally, the front. This is where you discover that Renault is doing a lot of things right when it comes to the interior. Let's power up the Megane and see what we're working with. First of all, in contrast to the Enyaq I recently drove, as you saw, the Megane has a conventional starter button. No seat sensors or anything like that. And this is just one of many items in the interior that are indicative of Renault's familiarity-first approach. They wanted to keep the interior as familiar as possible for people coming off a combustion engine vehicle, which is why this interior also resembles Renault's recent crossovers, the Austral, the Megane, and so on and so forth. The steering wheel is perfectly straightforward, and I'm a huge fan of the look. The buttons are all real buttons, it's easy to turn, and it's nice and soft to the touch. It also hides the world's angriest horn. Okay, not really. Now take a look at the cluster screen. One of the modes are these two dials that are clearly meant to resemble a tachometer and speedometer, except obviously one of them is not a tachometer. You also have the option of a cleaner screen with very few items and a full screen navigation map. Behind the steering wheel you have 3 different stalks just on the right side. I complained about this when I drove the Megane in Switzerland, and I'm gonna complain about it again. I activated the wipers once while trying to engage drive. There has to be a better solution for this, and I urge Renault to explore alternatives when it's time to facelift this car. The stalks on the right side are the shifter, wipers, and audio controls, by the way. And also, I forgot to write this in the voiceover, the multi-sense button on the steering wheel is for the drive modes, and we'll get to that during the driving section of the video. Let's move on to the center, where we find this giant vertical infotainment system, which was a little too far away to comfortably tap in my seating position. I absolutely cannot fault the software, however. This system runs on Android Automotive, which means the navigation is done entirely through Google Maps, regardless of if you pair a smartphone or not. And of course you have the Google Play Store to download extra apps. Of course you do have the option of Apple CarPlay, and there's even a classic notification shade like Android smartphones have. The screen also contains some more granular controls, and it's also where you can access some of the Megane's more interesting features, like the massaging seats, which were actually pretty decent. Below the screen you have a row of identical levers and switches for the climate control. Thank you, thank you, thank you. They all work as you'd expect, and while the heated seats and steering wheel are accessed through the screen, at least they're always at the bottom. And you can program the little star button on the steering wheel to engage the steering wheel heating, which I did. Below the screen is a hidden wireless charging pad for your phone, and below all of that, a small storage area with an adjustable cup holder. Storage areas in the interior are generally pretty solid. It was also pretty easy to find a good driving position, and the memory settings for the seats were seamless thanks to the driver account system. This interior is begging for more light, however. It was fairly dark in here, not helped by the tiny and tinted rear windows and the lack of a sunroof. Frankly, for 60 grand, and yes, that is the price in Macedonia, a sunroof should be standard. Tell you what else should be standard for 60 grand, a higher resolution backup camera. Nope, the Megane's backup camera is straight out of 2010. At least there are all-around parking sensors though. Let's take the Megane out on the road. It's clear from the onset that the Megane's true home is the city. First of all, I need to tell you about the way the drive modes have been set up. The multi-sense button on the steering wheel, which I mentioned a little bit ago, is what switches the drive modes in the Megane, and you have 4. There's Eco, Normal, Sport, and Personal that you can set up yourself. I drove the Megane in Eco mode in the city majority of the time, because James may. This is the first electric car I've tested where there is a very clear difference in throttle response depending on the drive mode. In Eco, it's quite delayed and it holds back on power, and I'm guessing this was also partially set up for the people coming off an internal combustion engine vehicle in mind. Normal mode sharpens it up a little bit, and Sport mode just makes it fly completely. The drive modes also change the interior ambient lighting colors, though disappointingly I couldn't find the option to change the colors myself. Let me know if this car has that in the comments below. Anyway, in town, the Megane is very serene and easy to drive. It's compact, it's maneuverable, the controls are light and easy, and it's surprisingly comfortable. Even with the 20-inch wheels, it's still surprisingly good at absorbing bumps in the road. Not much bad to say about the highway dynamics either. No issues with picking up speed at all, although it could do with just a little less wind noise. There was quite a bit, but the rest was all pretty quiet, including the tires. The biggest surprise? The Megane is great fun when you rag on it. The immediate responsiveness in sport mode is one thing, but it also manages to stay completely flat during harder cornering, and the steering is surprisingly direct and precise during more spirited driving. Renault certainly knows a thing or two about making a car fun to drive, and the Megane aims to keep that going, despite being a totally different vehicle to all the 5 Turbo GTs and Clio 172s of yore. And that's the Renault Megane E-Tech Electric. Renault has been tinkering with electric cars for the better part of a decade and a half now, and the Megane is a great demonstration of all the lessons they learned on the way. Renault understands that the world doesn't need more giant 2-ton electric SUVs. They are firm believers in the compact electric car, and the fruit of their labor is fantastic. The Megane E-Tech gets a score of 8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching this video, everybody. If you liked it, be sure to hit like and subscribe to the channel. Also follow me on Twitter. There will be a link in the description as always, and I will see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.